Hello， 大家好，今天我想跟你们分享我怎么学中文。我先跟你们说两个事情。第一，我的中文不是完美的，这个我知道了。I'm definitely not here claiming to be a Chinese expert or a native Chinese speaker. 对我来说，我的中文水平就够了。但是，如果你想知道怎么学 perfect Chinese， 可能不要看这个视频，好不好？第二个事情，学习中文的话，没有 secret formula， 没有 tricks or secrets， 这个不是那种3个月学会中文的视频，不是那种。我觉得学习中文是一个 journey， 大家的 journey 都不一样了，没有对的，没有不对的。所以今天我想跟你们分享我的 journey， 不只是我怎么学中文，也是我的中国故事 my China story. Okay, let's go. My Chinese journey started in 2012 as little baby-faced Amy walked into the shining gates of the University of New South Wales. I was there to study a business commerce degree, and I thought, you know what, learning Chinese is always going to be a good thing. So I took a Chinese major, and alongside my business degree, I took Chinese classes at my university. I had about 3 hours of contact class hours per week. And let me just say, full disclosure, right off the bat, 3 hours of Chinese per week is not enough to even get you close to learning Chinese. But don't get me wrong, having Chinese classes is a really great way of learning the basics, the foundations, learning the pinyin, the characters, the tones. But don't expect to graduate from university with a few Chinese classes in your belt and feel like you're going to know how to speak Chinese. It's just not going to work like that. Actually, there are a lot of things that they taught us in our classes that I have never heard a Chinese person actually say. The most obvious example, one of the first things we're taught in Chinese classes is 你好吗, which means how are you? The fact is, Chinese don't say that. I have never heard anyone say that, and if you wanted to ask a Chinese person how they are, the best thing you could probably say is 你吃了吗, which is have you eaten yet? You could even say 你过得怎么样, but even this is a little bit strange. As a cultural thing, I've noticed that Chinese people don't have this kind of small talk at the beginning of their conversations as us Westerners know it. You know, there's no, hi, how you going? Good, thanks, how are you? Which really is just a way of greeting each other. In China, it's, you know, if they've got something to say, they're just going to launch into it and say it, which I really respect. It's just a different way of starting a conversation, and you know, saying 你好吗 to a Chinese person is just gonna leave you with puzzled looks on their end. So just be aware of that. But regardless of this, I would recommend to anyone who's planning to start Chinese to begin doing so in a classroom environment. And this is for several reasons. The first reason is that with such a complex language like Chinese, it's really important to get good foundations and be taught well early on. I know there are a lot of language learning apps out there at the moment, you know, Duolingo, that type of thing. I would really advise in the beginning, if you're just starting out in Chinese, don't use those kind of apps, because you don't want to be making little mistakes early on and then find yourself 3 years down the track and trying to reverse the mistakes you're making in the beginning. Like, use those apps by all means to complement your studies in a classroom environment. I really just think the best way to go about starting to learn Chinese is to have a trained professional, a good Chinese teacher to come in and just teach you the basics, get you the good foundations, and then really how you grow is up to you. And my second reason for learning in a classroom environment is in order to learn Chinese characters. So many people and friends have told me, oh, I'm gonna start learning Chinese, but I wanna learn it really quickly, so I'm just gonna like not learn the characters and just try and like pick it up without the characters. Don't do this. Do not do this. It may sound way easier to bypass these complicated squiggly things, but trust me, it's actually gonna be a lot easier for you to just put in the work in the beginning. By even just knowing the most basic Chinese characters, you're able to properly integrate yourself into Chinese society. But seriously, in this online world, everything, especially in China, is happening online, and in the Chinese apps, everything is in Chinese. So by understanding and reading a little bit of Chinese, you'll be able to order your takeaway off the Chinese apps, you'll be able to shop on Taobao, you'll be able to send your Chinese friends WeChat messages. It's so worthwhile. while. I have quite a few foreign friends living in China who speak fluent Chinese, but they never learned to read or write Chinese characters, and they are always complaining about it and regretting it and telling everyone that they can reach that you should from the beginning be learning Chinese characters. So after 2 years of university Chinese classes, I had the opportunity to do a year abroad in Fudan University in Shanghai. If you're thinking of going on exchange, Fudan is like the best. For me, arriving in Shanghai was like an awakening. From the moment I stepped foot in Shanghai, I felt like a piece of me was at home. And I've traveled a lot and I've never felt such a click or an affinity for a country. There was no culture shock for me whatsoever. I fell right into step with life in Shanghai. It was like I was always meant to be there. But my language definitely needed some work. I discovered that on my first day of being in Shanghai. So I arrived in Shanghai, made some new friends of the students I'd be studying with. We all go out to dinner together, and I'm so impressed by their level of Chinese. They're just blubbering on about things, and I'm at first feeling really intimidated. And then once we get to the restaurant, I was quite thirsty, and I found myself in a really weird and kind of embarrassing situation. I knew how to say water, I knew how to say waiter, I knew how to say give me, but for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how to string together the sentence of waiter, could you please bring me some water? And you know, I think the waiter came over and I was like, oh, 服务员, 水, 我, 给, 快. And everyone, you know, all these new friends I just made looking at me like, oh, have you just started Chinese? And I was so embarrassed to actually have to look them in the eye and say, no, actually I've been learning for 2 years. I realized I had quite some way to go. But the environment of just being in China helped me so much. And it wasn't long before my listening began to improve. Being surrounded by Chinese every day, just listening to conversations. At the beginning, someone would be talking and I'd kind of lose myself translating in my head and figuring out what they're trying to say. But time in the environment, time in Shanghai allowed me to slowly make progress in my listening. And even though I was at Fudan University to be studying business courses, not actually studying Chinese, I improved more in 6 months of being in Shanghai than I had done in the previous 2 years of me having, you know, weekly Chinese classes at university. You can't underestimate the power of the environment and, you know, being in the country itself. Halfway into my exchange experience, I had like 2 months off for the summer vacation and I decided to spend 5 weeks traveling China. If you want to improve your Chinese, I would strongly recommend go traveling in China. There's nothing to test your language skills more than the pressure of being late for your train, needing to line up in this ticket line and having, you know, impatient Chinese behind you and trying to explain your situation with the ticket seller. It's very overwhelming, but it really puts your Chinese to the test. Also, by traveling, you have the opportunity of spending a lot of time with locals. And you know, you have no other option than to speak Chinese. They don't know English, so you use what you have and you learn very quickly not to feel awkward about not having perfect Chinese. For me, one of the things I struggled with most at the beginning of learning Chinese was feeling like I wasn't saying things perfectly and I would feel really awkward about it. But after traveling in China, you learn that just get your point across and it's okay. One piece of advice I'd share is never feel awkward about your level of Chinese. However far you are in your language journey is already incredible. It's such a complex language and there's nothing to be embarrassed about by using a word wrong or using the wrong tone or, you know, it's already an incredible accomplishment. So after I came back from my year abroad in Shanghai, my Chinese was so much better than it had ever been before. I was so proud of the progress I had made, but I was also terrified that coming back to an English speaking environment and not being surrounded with the Chinese speaking every day, that I would lose all the progress that I had made. So I came up with 3 really great ways of trying to put as much Chinese into my Australian day-to-day life as possible. The first thing I did is I started listening to Chinese songs. I would listen to them, learn them by heart, and sing them to myself, usually in the shower. To this day, my sister can still remember and sing the song I was so obsessed with for like 3 months. This is actual footage of us singing that song. 我的深沉的脑海里，我的梦里，我的心里，我的歌声里。The second thing I did is I started watching Chinese TV shows every day. I really think this is the best way to improve your Chinese once you've mastered, a conversational level of Chinese speaking. So what I would do is I would watch a TV show. This one here, this is one of my favorites for learning Chinese. It's 爸爸去哪儿 or Dad, Where Are We Going? You can find it on YouTube. And it's such a great option for Chinese learners because this is a reality TV show about kids traveling with their dads. So it's really not complicated Chinese because the dads are speaking to young children, and it's also super entertaining. And you'll also learn a lot about China by watching this show. So this is how I would do it. I would press play. I would pause it every time someone said something. I would read the subtitles, and if there was any word in here that I didn't recognize, I would look it up using Pleco, a really great dictionary app. And watching Chinese TV shows is so great because you're practicing your reading by reading the subtitles, you're increasing your vocabulary, you're increasing your listening, you're learning how to speak in more colloquial ways, you're learning some slang. Another way I used to practice my Chinese with TV shows is I would listen to them say something and then I would repeat it to practice my speaking. 你觉得呢？那自己想想。那你自己想想。可以的。可以的，爸爸。I'll also write below in the description some other Chinese TV shows that I've really liked that have helped me improve, so you can check that out. So the third thing I did when in Australia to maintain my Chinese level, and this is when I was at more of an advanced stage, I thought it was time to do a bit more advanced reading. The first book I read in Chinese was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I've read this book and Harry Potter series maybe 10 times in English, so I know the story pretty back to front. And I think this is the best way to introduce yourself to reading in Chinese, or really any language, is take a story that you're already really familiar with, and then when you're reading it through, you're not guessing about where the story is going or what might be happening. You know exactly what's happening, and if you see a foreign character or a sentence you don't understand, it's okay. Just move on and understand what you can and take it really slow. That book took me a year to finish, but it's still to this day one of my biggest Chinese language accomplishments. And I'm so proud of myself that I was able to read a full novel in Chinese. So by that stage, I had been learning for about 4 years. My Chinese was okay, I could communicate, I could even read a little bit, and it was time for me to push myself and apply to participate in the Chinese bridge competition. And if you don't know about the Chinese bridge competition, it's basically a competition run by the Confucius Institute, which brings together Chinese language speakers from all around the world to participate in this Chinese TV show environment and battle it out to see whose Chinese is the best. It was the most amazing environment for learning Chinese I've ever seen. It brought together people from every country you can imagine, all learning Chinese, and it was the coolest feeling standing in a group of foreigners where the common language isn't English, it's Chinese, and you're speaking to a Zimbabwean or a German or a South African using Chinese to communicate. It was the coolest thing ever, and it was such a motivating environment seeing all these amazing Chinese speakers. And the Chinese speaker jealousy is real. To this day, when I hear someone with better Chinese than I do, I'm like, I just want to be you. I'm so jealous. Like, how did you do that? But yeah, in this environment, it was just amplified. Like, these people were all representing their countries, the best of the best. I think it was just a huge fluke that I got in. And yeah, I made it quite far. Out of 100 and something contestants, I made it to the final 15. I competed in these crazy challenges. I sung in Chinese. I went into like the Chinese Big Brother house. By that stage, I was really feeling the pressure of the competition because, I was by far the worst of the final 15 contestants. And I'm not being modest here. They were all fluent, native level Chinese speakers. And I was like a baby compared to them. But it was a really great environment to push me and motivate me, and I worked so hard, and it was after that experience that I decided, yep, China's for me. I'm really gonna pursue a future there in some way. And the following year, as soon as I had graduated from my university with my business degree, I took myself back to China using the scholarship that I had won as my prize in the Chinese bridge competition. So my prize was basically choose any university that I wanted to go to China and study a year of intense Chinese language courses. So I chose Tsinghua University in Beijing because I wanted, a different city experience to the Shanghai one I had. And also Tsinghua is #1 university in China. So I thought it could be a really cool experience. And yeah, anyone who has the opportunity of doing an intense language course in China, take it. It was the first time I was able to spend 100% of my time on Chinese. Before going to Tsinghua, Chinese was only ever really a side hobby or something I did after work or after I finished my assignments, and it felt so good to just put everything into it, and I improved so much because in the intensive language course, as the name suggests, it's intense. It's 5 hours a day, 5 days a week of Chinese classes, and that's not including the self-study time you have to do after class, which would probably be 2 to 3 hours. If you put your mind to it and you're ready to study really hard and work hard for your Chinese, you can learn so much in an intensive language course. But the one big negative thing about intensive language courses in China is that all your friends are foreigners. You're studying with them every day, and it's only natural that you become really close with them. So the problem with this is, yes, you may be spending 5 hours a day studying Chinese in class, but as soon as you leave class, you're only speaking English. So it's really kind of a 2-step forward, 1-step back situation. And as hard as it is, the best way to improve your Chinese when doing an intense language course is to make some Chinese friends. In my second semester, I made it a big priority of mine to try and disassociate myself from the foreign crowd, which was really a little bit awkward, but instead try go out on my own and make some Chinese friends. And I did. And they're to this day some of my closest friends in the world. I've traveled across China with them, and even after I finished Tsinghua, I lived with them for a 4-month period, and that is where I learned Chinese. I credit 50% of my Chinese to them. I was living, breathing, eating Chinese every day for 4 months. Like, it got to the stage where the only time I was speaking English was when I was FaceTiming my parents, and it felt weird. I even started dreaming in Chinese. So one of these friends, her name is Millie, she's one of my bestest friends in the world now, and she's one of the most open-minded, intellectual, strong, independent women I've really ever met. And we would have some of the most intense conversations while drinking tea every morning. And, I would find myself halfway through a conversation talking about, deep stuff like religion, politics, societal problems, and kind of stop myself and be like, wait, I'm speaking in Chinese right now. And that's where I realized how far I had come. And throughout learning Chinese, you never feel like you're making much progress. But when you look back on it, you're kind of like, wow, like, how did I get here? How am I suddenly talking about, what is life with a Chinese woman? And it's an amazing feeling. So for me, my Chinese language journey has definitely been more of a slow burn. No sprinting here. But not to say that you can't learn Chinese at a faster pace. I know people that have been studying Chinese for 2 years that have already way surpassed me. So as I said in the beginning, there's no right way and there's no wrong way of studying Chinese. But this was my way and this was my journey. And I find myself 8 years later suddenly able to speak Chinese. But yeah, I'd like to say to anyone who's considering learning Chinese, it may sound really intimidating right now. It's like you're standing at the base of a mountain looking up at all the hard work to come. But once you get into it and you start it, I've never felt the struggle. It's only been fun and enjoyable and life-changing. And for anyone who is currently learning Chinese, I know that you're currently having bad days. Like, I had so many days where I couldn't even string a sentence together. And to this day, I have days where I'm like, what the hell is going on? Why can't I find my words? Why do I feel so stupid? And trust me, you are going to have those days. But then the next day you're going to wake up and you'll find yourself having an amazing conversation and using words that you didn't even know you could remember. Just know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and even though it doesn't feel like you're making progress, you are. So yeah, good luck to you. However you decide to go about learning Chinese, I know you're gonna go great. So one super quick last thing I'd like to share with you guys is that I have just started an Instagram account for Blondie in China. I'm super excited about it. Really not much there. I have 0 followers and you could be my first one. It's gonna be a place where I share all my China photos, China content, some really funny Chinese stories as I'm traveling, and yeah, I would really appreciate the support. But yeah, thanks guys so much. I'll see you next time. Bye.